Well, this case was initiated by myself and Dan Taylor, and just today the DPP has intervened and squashed, well, intending to squash this case tomorrow. So it's been to change the situation to some degree. And we're alleging that this Mark Regev is an Australian citizen, has breached Section 82D of the Commonwealth Act, and therefore is in breach of that crime, which is advocating starvation and being an advisor to the Netanyahu government and war cabinet, and that he's responsible for the crimes that are going on in Palestine at the moment. So it's an important case, and we're be interested to know why and what reasons the DPP have in squashing this case. There's a lot of interest in it, particularly with the Aboriginal people in this country, where the crime of genocide and war crimes against humanity Australia's been very reluctant to engage with. In fact, the International Criminal Court or international law. So it's I don't know if it's a step back, but maybe clearing the way in terms of actually getting to the international court, because it seems that the courts in this country are not going to be. Seems like we need to exhaust the domestic remedy, and that's what we're doing there. And they're demonstrating that they're reluctant, unable, and unwilling to engage. So, depending on what the DPP's reasons are, we'll consider it further from there. And I'm already looking at countering that proposal. I don't know what else to say. Mark Regev is clearly responsible for advocating these crimes like starvation. I think it just typifies Australia's attitude or reluctance to engage. And that's the whole reasons why we're here today, is to get some justice for our people. And there's long-standing issues around genocide, lack of recognition of our people, and so we want to clear the decks to get to the International Criminal Court. This is what it takes. That's what we'll do. So yeah, it's a little bit disappointing that they've done that. We'll see whether we can take it any further tomorrow, depending on what the statements that the DPP are making. Yeah.
So I've got a media release to read out here. Senior Netanyahu advisor served in Victorian court facing genocide charges. Melbourne, Australia. Mark Regev, former senior advisor to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Australian citizen, has been served with charges of advocating genocide. The next hearing was due to take place at the Victorian Magistrates Court tomorrow, 10th of December 2024. The case, initiated by Croatatangalang elder and human rights advocate Uncle Robbie Thorpe, accuses Regev of publicly endorsing actions constituting genocide during the Gaza siege. In statements broadcast on Australian media, Regev allegedly supported policies aimed at destroying the Palestinian population in Gaza, including advocating for starvation. These actions, in breach of Section 80.2D of the Criminal Code Act 1995, carry a maximum penalty of 7 years imprisonment. This case is a significant step forward compared to ongoing international criminal court prosecutions involving Netanyahu and Israeli Defense Minister Gallant, as the ICC case cannot proceed until their arrest. In contrast, the prosecution of Regev is already underway. The legal proceedings unfold against the backdrop of Australia's shifting stance on Palestine, marked by its recent vote at the United Nations in support of a resolution demanding an end to Israel's occupation of Palestinian territories. This marks a departure from Australia's traditional alignment with the United States. Under the Criminal Code Act 1995, this case tests Australia's commitment to upholding justice, both locally and in the context of international accountability. With Israel invoking diplomatic immunity on Regev's behalf, the decision to proceed with prosecution now lies with the Commonwealth and the Department of Public Prosecutions. This highlights the far-reaching implications of the case. Uncle Robbie Thorpe stated, "This case will show whether Australia is serious about prosecuting crimes of genocide or whether we allow our citizens to shield themselves behind bureaucracy. We have a law in place with a lower burden of proof than international law. It must be applied now to ensure accountability for actions that promote destruction and suffering." End quote. Thorpe urges the Commonwealth Director of Public Prosecutions to take decisive action in filing an indictment against Regev. He believes this case presents an opportunity for Australia to lead in enforcing laws against genocide. Australia has the tools, the evidence, and the obligation. Now we must act. Failure to prosecute Mark Regev for advocating genocide would be a stain on our nation's conscience, Uncle Robbie has said. The charges against Mark Regev mark an important moment in the fight for accountability and justice. For far too long, leaders and officials responsible for the suffering and the destruction of marginalised communities have acted with impunity. This case isn't just about Gaza, it's about the broader principle that no individual, no matter their position or connections, is above the law. If the Australian courts fail to pursue the case to its full conclusion or diplomatic immunity prevents a fair prosecution, the matter could escalate to the International Criminal Court. The ICC holds jurisdiction over genocide and other international crimes when domestic systems are unable or unwilling to act. With Regev already served and the case progressing, this prosecution presents an opportunity to set a precedent for domestic accountability while reinforcing global justice mechanisms. Now, I'd just like to also restate that earlier today, unfortunately, we received a disappointing email from the Director of Public Prosecutions informing us that they would be taking over the case and they would be moving to have the case dismissed, citing that the reason being is they do not believe that it will progress to a prosecution, and they do not believe that there is enough evidence and enough weight with this case in order to proceed. Now, we disagree with this assertion. This case is the first of its kind here in this colony, and as a result, there is no precedent for them to base this judgment off. And it also acts as somewhat of a test and trial case and a public interest matter that the court should proceed with in order to determine whether or not, Regev actually is guilty of breaching this criminal code and is guilty of advocating for genocide. I would also just like to add to that when an Aboriginal leader stands up to hold a foreign war criminal accountable on our land, it is not just a legal case, it is a moral reckoning. The Commonwealth's decision to protect Mark Regev is a betrayal of justice, and it exposes the deep colonial hypocrisy that continues to shield power while oppressing truth. The genocide against our people and the brutalization of Palestinians share a common thread: the denial of sovereignty, the erasure of humanity, and the violence of colonialism. Our struggle for justice cannot ignore the suffering of others, and in fact, our struggle for justice and our struggle for justice for others only helps to strengthen justice both here and abroad. The Genocide Convention exists to prevent atrocities, but in Australia, unfortunately, it is just words on paper. If the government won't allow us to hold perpetrators accountable for crimes abroad, how can we trust them to address the crimes committed against our own people? They call it justice, but it's nothing more than political theatre. Let this be a call to all oppressed peoples. The fight against genocide, whether here or in Gaza, is our shared battle. We will not rest until every perpetrator is brought to an account. Australia has become a safe haven for war criminals and a platform for genocidal rhetoric. By silencing this case, the government is complicit in enabling oppression, not just against Palestinians, but against all people struggling for freedom and for dignity. This case could have set a precedent for similar charges related to genocide, including claims by First Nations peoples regarding our treatment under colonial rule. However, like every previous attempt for us to seek justice for the genocidal war crimes committed here, it has as well been quashed.
I'm only just concerned about what the reasons of the DPP is, and I think we'll continue from there. We're intending to appeal that decision and take it to a higher court, or hopefully to the International Criminal Court, because we know that we're never going to see any justice in these courts. They're a part of the institution of racism of what Australia is. It's very clear to me that Australia is guilty of all things defined as genocide, according to the 1948 Genocide Convention. Just been going on a little bit too long. It's really offensive. People like Mark Regev, Australian citizen, to be advocating genocide and acts like starvation and things like that. So, just can't be tolerated. And I think it's a bit of a test case whether Australia's going to uphold these international legal obligations. So, really, that's where my thoughts are. So, depending on what this Director of Public Prosecutions reasons are, I think we're going to be going from there and determine our next steps in this matter.